Welcome back to part 3 of how I ranked first on the UK bar exam. Part 1, we covered the centralised exams, crime, civil and ethics. Part 2, we looked at each of the advocacy exams, submission, examination in chief and cross-examination. And in this video, we're going to look at conferencing and the ReDOC exam. Guys, it's nice to have you back on the channel. If you're new here, my name's Taz and I'm a barrister based in the UK. And on this channel, we overcome the challenges facing law students and explore the nature of our minds through materials, supplements, and practices to create happy, healthy, and optimized mental well-being. We're going to start off by looking at conferencing, and then we're going to move on to ReDOC. For those of you who don't know, ReDOC is short for Resolution of Disputes Outside of Court. Let's dive into conferencing, starting off with the studying side of things. So the first thing to say is hopefully your institution would have provided you with some form of a manual like BPP did here with the conferencing manual to put the foundations in place. Once you've had a look at the manual and you begin to understand how the structure of the exam is going to look, you need to have a look at the mark scheme. I always preach this because you need to know what you're being assessed on, because this will ultimately dictate your performance in the exam when you know what you're being marked on. I would really recommend having a look at how the BSB define what a fatal flaw is, because conferencing, so much more than the other exams, is easier to commit a fatal flaw on because you have processes which you need to follow correctly for plea and for sentencing. From memory, the definition is this.
This video is sponsored by Lex Street, the online community platform for aspiring barristers pursuing a career at the Bar of England and Wales. Lex Street offer self-paced courses to support students on the bar course and with securing pupillage. They provide one-to-one coaching in addition to offering a free online community where students can access live events including advocacy workshops and pupillage workshops. Sign up free today at lexstreet.com and we look forward to welcoming you and supporting you on your journey to the bar.
The barrister's analysis is so incorrect that it puts their client's interests at risk, or it puts the barrister at risk of liability for negligence. Or the student's oral presentation is just so poor it's worthless and it's not offering any value. That's it in a nutshell. Let's look at fatal flaws in a bit more detail, starting with plea, and then we'll move on to sentencing. So with plea, it's normally a situation where you advise the client incorrectly as to their plea, and this will happen where your advice doesn't align with their instructions. There could be last-minute instructions which completely change what the plea is, and you've failed to take account of this. The last two really is where you've just completely failed to give any advice on plea, or where the advice that you have given is just not clear. Sentencing is normally a situation where you fail to let the client know, based on the facts, that there is a risk of them receiving a custodial sentence. For the conferencing exam, you need two documents really. You need a script, and the other one is you need the official plan. This is the one that you're going to submit. The script's really useful to just have that boilerplate language that you're going to use with the client for the three main sections, which are the introduction, the questions, and the legal advice. I would personally recommend put the language used in the script to memory, but it's always nice to have in the exam. In case you blank for any reason, you could just look at the script and you're back on track. The official plan, it's the main document for the conferencing exam. It will completely guide the conference for you. This is normally made by editing templates provided by your institution. In my bar course pack, there's loads of templates, so go and check it out. What I'll say is this is a key point. When you're drafting your official plan, use two colors, black text and red text. Black text is standard text that you're not going to change. Use the red text as visual cues in the conference to remind you to do something, be that taking information from a client or warning a client about something. Let's look at the plan in a bit more detail, starting off with the introduction. This is pretty boilerplate stuff. I'm sure it will develop as you go through the SGSs, but whatever it is, put it to memory and just deliver it. Next is the questions. This is the heart of the conferencing exam. So you need to be putting time into refining these questions. What I'll say here is this. There are two sets of questions. There are the standard questions you need to ask, which are background, previous conviction, arrest and interview, those style of questions. Always ask about if they regret what's happened, because that allows you to establish remorse. And then you've got the case specific questions, which are these. For example, if there's an argument in the pub that's ended up in a GBH, It needs to be the events surrounding the incident itself, and then detailed questions around the offense so that you have all the information you need to properly advise the client. I think some people forget to actually reference the evidence in their plan. So if you have evidence from the brief that you've been given for a particular question, remember on the plan to reference the statement with the page number. Don't forget during the conference to put the prosecution's case to the client. Next is the advice. I think what's key to remember here is that there might be 2 offenses in the brief that you're given, and if there are, you need to advise for each, following the structure of giving the law for the offense, then it's the prosecution's case, the defense's case, and then it's plea and sentence to finish. And you might have to do that twice. Don't forget about this standard advice topics that you need to give advice on, and these include any previous convictions, adverse inferences, any plea warnings, and most importantly, don't forget to advise them what, if any, credit is available for a guilty plea. Finally is the sentence. So in the actual plan itself, the sentence can be relatively boilerplate because it's about allocation, about the principle of totality and things like that you can just take out of a template and throw in. In terms of actually advising the client as to sentence, I would personally recommend practice using the sentencing guidelines. When you give a sentence, give it within a bracket. Don't give them a specific number, oh, this offense is 9 months or 2 years, because you're pigeonholing yourself then. Give them the most likely bracket and then advise them as to guilty plea and non-guilty. I put together a bundle that you should be taking into your conferencing exam, and this includes any model answers or templates we've already discussed, your actual criminal manual, Blackstones, then a page of the relevant law for the offense, and the actual sentencing guidelines for the offense that you're presented with. I put a little checklist together for the conferencing exam as well. Number 1 is take a little watch in the exam so you can visually see in terms of the time where you're up to. The most important rule in the entire conferencing exam is this. When you're in the exam, after 12 minutes, you have to move on to the legal advice section. Otherwise, you've completely bombed the exam. You want to be signposting throughout the entire conference. When asking your questions, focus on the key issues in the case. I remember in my mock, I was just asking so many irrelevant questions that by the time I'd not even gotten to the advice and it was over, I was like, oh. Order the questions. So if there's 2 separate offenses, treat them as 2 separate offenses. If they naturally run into each other, then order the questions to that flow. You need to be actively listening in the conference for any new information which presents itself which was not in the brief. Clarify the client's relationship with any of the witnesses or the witness's relationship with themselves to establish credibility. And if the story, the client's story that is, has changed, ask why. Clearly establish whether the client admits to the charges against them. Another thing to remember is you always want to ask the client, do they have any previous convictions? For exam technique, 2 things to say, they're both very important. The first is when you're drafting the official plan, you want to have 2 sections for a lot of different sections in the plan. One is pre-LMI, which is last minute instructions, and one is post-LMI. An example of this is plea. What is the plea before the last minute instructions and what is it after? Have the post-LMI in red. Why? Because we've said this before. This is a visual cue for you to take that information to potentially change the plea. The second, as I've said before, is timing. If you don't get the timing right, it's a death sentence in there. And that is the most common setback in the conferencing exam, believe it or not. Let's talk ReDOC. I didn't use any of the books given to me to prepare for the ReDOC exam. Why? Because there was so much fluff in them. What I used, as I referred to in the previous video, the keys to success in the bar training course, was essentially the notes that I bought from Oxford Uni Notes. I then added my own notes to them and put them all in here for the 4 main topics, which are ADR, negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. I purely used the Oxford Uni Notes to prepare for this exam, and I scored 91 on the ReDOC paper, so they can't be that bad. The other thing to mention is in my bar course pack, I've included a document called a ReDOC consolidation, which is a brief overview of the entire module. The first thing to do is print off the BSB syllabus for ReDOC. Keeping in mind, as I've said before, that throughout the year, they might change it, add things to it, and you need to be vigilant of that and add it to your notes. Whichever notes you end up deciding to use for the ReDOC exam, as I always recommend, Cross-reference the syllabus with your own set of notes to ensure that you have a comprehensive set of notes that you can use to prepare for the exam. Before starting your ReDOC revision, pick up the past paper and without the mark scheme, read the entire thing, just so you know what to expect when the day comes. This will have a positive influence on the way that you revise because you've got a feel for the style of questions that might come up. When you start studying, I would recommend implementing the traffic light highlighting system, which I referred to in part 1 of this series. And what that is, just to recap, is that you highlight priority information in red, important information in yellow, and be nice to remember information in green. Make sure you attend all your seminars and take as many notes as possible, and try to add flow diagrams to the end of every SGS. For me, preparing for the ReDOC exam, I relied heavily on the flow diagrams, and honestly, there's a ton of them in my bar course training pack. For ReDOC, I recommend having 2 folders. The first, you guessed it, it's the flow diagram folder. And the second is for your syllabus. And the way I'd organize this is the way I'd organize civil and crime. It starts off with your notes and the questions, which in ReDOC includes MCQs and SAQs. After that, you'll have your mock exam and your 1-page summary for ADR, for negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. I hope you haven't forgotten about your good old log. In here, you're going to be recording all the MCQs and SAQs that you've gotten wrong, and you know the reason for that. Unlike civil and crime, the volume of material in ReDOC is a lot more manageable. And because you're being asked SAQs, you actually need to know the information. You can't just guess and circle something. You need to write something down, so it needs to be in here. So what I would recommend, I really recommend this, go and get some revision cards and distill all 4 topics, ADR, negotiation, mediation, and arbitration, onto these and begin memorizing these cue cards. I got each topic down to maybe 15 to 20 revision cards, and then I whittled them down to 10 absolute summary cards. When you're a month out from the exam, you have to prioritize application. So at this point, like with civil and crime, my process was this. I started with the SGSs, I went through all the MCQs, marked them. Then the SAQs, I marked them. I then went onto the mock paper, marked that. All the ones I got wrong, I went into the log, and then I reviewed all those questions collectively. I then moved on to go over my revision cards one last time, alongside the 1-page summaries that I've done. I'm going to split exam technique into MCQs and SAQs. So for the MCQs, it's the elimination method. You're presented with 4 answers. You eliminate 2 straight off the bat, which it can't be, and then you go with the one you think it is, and if you have no idea, you take a 50-50. For the SAQs, I'm going to give you a list of tips, starting with this. Read the question really carefully. I recall a question, something along the lines of this. It said, it is a requirement that arbitrators must be independent. And the mark scheme said, no, it is a requirement that arbitrators must be impartial. So things like that you need to be really vigilant of. And also remember to distinguish between must and may. Which is it? What's the question asking? Don't just describe. Remember, always, the rule of thumb at university is description gets minimal marks. You want to be applying your knowledge to the factual scenario. Ask yourself at the start of every question, who am I advising? This will dictate the answer that you write. Always consider the financial positions of the parties. This will tend to influence which way you tend to go in terms of litigation, ADR, mediation. So it's very relevant to every question, really. Double check this, but when I did the exam, there was no negative marking, which meant you couldn't be marked down for throwing extra information in there. So with that said, keyword dump it. Throw everything you have at it. Hopefully something sticks and you just keep hoovering up those marks. My penultimate tip is this: don't get caught up in discussing the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses, and actually forget to advise the client. That is your role. My final piece of advice is just memorize the mark scheme verbatim. When you look at all the mark schemes for the SGSs, you see, number 1, how similar the structure to the answers are that they give, and number 2, that the keywords are all very similar. So if you memorize them and you just go into the exam, and when those style of questions come up, you just remember the way in which it's structured and the keywords used, you deploy them, and guess what? You're going to kill that exam. And other than that, guys, you know what it is. I'll see you at the next one.